Hello, everybody. Welcome to Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. Everyone, this story is called Grandma's Diary and is told in the first person, but this is not my story, and I will not tell you where the story comes from, as the sharer did not want me to share any real information about him. You will find out the reason in the story. Here is the story. I was a child who couldn't live without my grandma. When I was in the third grade of elementary school, my dad passed away in a car accident. My grandma, who had always doted on me, cherished me even more as her only blood relative. That's why I loved going to Grandma's house. Unfortunately, the already not so friendly relationship between my grandma and mom, which had been strained as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, completely broke off after my dad's death. My mom never visited Grandma's house again, but fortunately, she did not restrict me from going there. Every Sunday morning back then, Grandma would take me to the temple to offer incense and pray. Grandma's faith was extremely devout. She rarely missed her weekly visits to the temple. Especially after my dad's death, she never missed a single one. Grandma's hand, holding mine as we walked to the temple, was always so warm, and I enjoyed going with her. She would always clasp her hands together, kneel on the cushion, and spend a long time praying with her eyes closed, murmuring silently without making any sound. I didn't really have anything to pray for, so I would just simply kowtow 3 times, and then spent a long time looking at Grandma's earnest profile. After finishing her prayer, Grandma would solemnly kowtow 3 times. I would always ask Grandma what she had just prayed for, but she would just smile faintly and never answer me. I didn't really care, as I was more excited about the ice cream or other snacks we would get on the way back home. Allow me to digress for a moment. I've had this so-called spiritual constitution since I was young, and I have always been troubled by things that are unimaginable to others. After my dad passed away, I was almost haunted every night by sleep paralysis and developed insomnia as a result. Even when I occasionally fell asleep naturally, I would feel something pulling my feet or stabbing pain in my stomach. What was worse, these symptoms did not improve as I grew older. Instead, they got worse. My mom took me to see doctors and even psychologists, but they couldn't find any issues. Later, through referrals, we also visited some fortune tellers and mediums. And we did spend quite a bit of money, but it was all in vain. So I eventually gave up. By the time I was in the 3rd year of junior high school, the strange phenomena became even more intense. Not only did I experience sleep paralysis every night, but the spirits pressing down on me also began to take on forms. Various ghostly figures of women in white with long hair, or sometimes bloated corpses. I don't know if there was any causal relationship, but due to the inability to sleep peacefully, I also started having hallucinations during the day. For example, while eating, the rice would appear to turn into wriggling worms. There were several times when crossing the street, I would see no vehicles, but halfway across, a car would suddenly appear right in front of me, causing a few minor traffic accidents. My mental state was almost at a breaking point during that period, and I had to take a leave of absence from school. However, staying at home didn't improve the situation either. My mom was busy with work and couldn't stay with me all the time. I would vomit several times a day. But instead of developing anorexia, I ended up with bulimia. The physical and mental torture left me in a constant state of daze and unease, and I attempted suicide many times, but none were successful. The repeated failure in suicide attempts only made me more miserable. Let me tell you responsibly, wanting to die but being unable to is truly the worst state a person can be in. Fortunately, during that time, Grandma would often come to visit me. When my mom was at work, she would just hold my hand and sit quietly with me, and that was the only time I felt any sense of peace in a day. Obviously, in such a state, I couldn't go to the temple with Grandma to pray. However, just as I was starting to feel a bit better and preparing to go back to school to take the high school entrance exam, my only spiritual support, my grandma, passed away. At that time, I couldn't cry anymore because I cried all my tears dry. All that surrounded me was sorrow and pain. I moved into the room that Grandma had lived in when my dad was still alive, holding onto her old clothes and crying without tears every day. Even in such a state, my mom acted as if nothing had happened, going to work as usual, eating and sleeping normally. Despite being my mother who raised me, I couldn't help but feel resentment towards her from the bottom of my heart. About 2 weeks after Grandma's death, I found that the hallucinations gradually stopped and the vomiting improved significantly. I called my only friend Zhi and told him about the situation. He said that it was because Grandma had taken all my misfortune with her when she passed away. Hearing this, I shuddered and finally shed tears, crying uncontrollably on the phone with Zhi. Half a year later, the sleep paralysis and other abnormal conditions completely disappeared, and my body began to recover. I was able to go out normally again. During that time, I almost went to Grandma's grave every week to remember the care she gave me and to thank her for taking away my sufferings. A year later, I was able to eat and sleep normally. My mental state was no longer depressed, and my weight returned to normal. I enrolled in an adult high school night class and worked during the day at a nearby printing factory. My classmates and colleagues were very considerate of me. Although I didn't get to experience the joys of my teenage years, at least I was finally able to live a normal life. Not long after my grandpa passed away, and the house that belonged to Grandma and Grandpa naturally came to me. I took a day off to sort through my grandparents' belongings. While cleaning out the wardrobe, I found a clothes bundle in the bottom corner, which contained 3 diaries. I opened the first page, and it was Grandma's handwriting. The diary started on the day before my dad passed away. All my family members had told me that my dad died in a car accident, but in my grandma's diary, it said that my dad committed suicide because of my mom's affair. I was shocked and suddenly understood why Grandma had always been so hostile towards my mom. However, when I turned to the next page, I froze, my whole body covered in cold sweat. It was filled with Grandma's hatred for me. It turned out that I was the child of my mom and her lover, and the only description Grandma had for me was, "I really want to kill him. It would be better if he were dead." The Grandma in the diary was completely different from the one I knew. It turned out that all the so-called spiritual experiences and the unbearable suffering I had gone through were actually the result of Grandma's prayers. For so long, every week, or perhaps every day, Grandma had been kneeling in front of the Buddha, praying with her eyes closed for what seemed like an eternity, wishing for my death. I don't want to say that the Buddha allowed or facilitated the curse, but rather Grandma's intense desire for my death was itself a kind of a venomous curse. I don't know if the torment I suffered as a teenager, which made me really want to die, truly originated from this curse. Now, thinking back, what's even more painful is that I thought that person was the only one in the world who loved me, and she was also the only one I loved. Okay, everybody, this is a very sad story, right? This is the end of the whole story. Please share what you think of the story and your stories. If you enjoy my work and would like to help me continue to bring this story to you, please subscribe to my channel or like my page. Give us thumbs up to the stories you appreciate and share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'd love to read them. Share the stories with anyone who might find them enjoyable. And everyone, I need a co-editor, a native English speaker to make these stories better. Thank you, everybody. This is Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. I got a lot of good stories to share with you. So, see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.